Hello friends, today we are going to talk about expressive portraits. So, many artists use expressive lines and colors in their portraits to show a particular mood or feeling. So sometimes the colors in the portrait or the way they draw the person's face might not be exactly how the person looks. It's based more on feeling, maybe the mood that the artist has or the mood that they want to show about the person being painted. This is a very expressive self-portrait done by the artist Vincent Van Gogh. Perhaps you remember him from last year, studying him and his famous painting Starry Night. And he is known for his swirling brushstrokes. So you see lots and lots of expressive lines, especially in the background and the lines of his jacket. And then the color in this is kind of a bluish gray. And to me, it kind of gives me kind of a little bit of a mood of sadness, or it's very serious, especially the way his expression looks. And if you remember, Vincent Van Gogh had a very difficult life. He wasn't able to sell many of his paintings, very few. And then it wasn't until after that he died that people realized how amazing his artwork is. And now his paintings, of course, are in museums all over the world. So here's another two more expressive portraits by the artist Henri Matisse. And Henri Matisse was an artist who lived in France in the early 1900s. And he created this movement with other artists called Fauvist. And in French, that means wild beast. And the reason why is you see the colors are kind of wild and crazy, and lots of bright kind of non-realistic colors used on both of these portraits here. So this is the portrait of Madame Matisse, who was his wife, and they call it green stripe because he decided to paint, you see the green stripe going down the center of her face, and this one's called The Woman with a Hat, very kind of fancy, colorful hat there. So again, looking at these portraits, it's giving us more of a feeling or mood. Very, very colorful, kind of wild kind of colors. And then also in the early 1900s, there was a movement in Germany called the Expressionist Movement. And again, they painted portraits with non-realistic color, kind of trying to express through their portraits a particular feeling or emotion. So we have this girl who's painted in this very kind of bright green color, although green sometimes makes us feel like we're sick. Although she doesn't look very sick. She looks kind of serious. Well, or I wouldn't say she looks sad, but it definitely gives us a very kind of an eerie feeling, I think, with these kind of very, very bright colors. And then there's another artist that I want to talk about because she loves using very, very bright and expressive colors in her portraits. And her name is Butler, and here is a photograph of her. And she is an artist who's working today. An artist who's working today is called a contemporary artist. And she started out as a painter and then decided later that she would rather create portraits through quilt making. So she first started doing portraits of family members, and then now she does portraits of other people. And as you see here, this is actually a quilt, and it looks like a painting, but it's all done with pieces of fabric that she sews together. And as you see, her colors are very, very bright and colorful. And it kind of, for me, gives me kind of a joyful feeling for how the color choices she uses. Perhaps the mood that you have when looking at some of this artwork might be a little bit different than mine. And that's okay. So here's a couple more of her quilt portraits. Looks like of a young boy and a young girl. Her grandmother and mother sewed every day making clothing, and they taught her the power of being able to make something for herself. So that's why she decided to do sewing instead of painting. And some of these quilts take over 200 hours to make, and she has said that African Americans originally quilted out of necessity to stay warm in places unlike their homelands, and they had very little resources. So sometimes they had very little money to spend on clothing or fabric. So many African American quilts from the Civil War era or the early 1900s were made of patches from small rags that they had to spare in a time when they wore their clothes until they literally fell apart. So they would use old pieces of clothing to make quilts. She says the fabrics she uses now they're new and more expensive, but her tradition is still carried on because she mixes new pieces of fabric with cloth given to her by her mother and grandmother, who also sew. Here's another one of her beautiful quilt paintings. I call them quilt paintings because they do look like paintings. And then finally, the last painting I want to show you, probably the most famous expressive portrait of all time, is called The Scream. And that is done by the artist Edvard Munch, and he was from the country of Norway. And he was born in 1863, so more than 150 years ago. And he is known again for this expressionist style. This is actually, he calls this a self-portrait, but obviously this is a self-portrait he painted the way he was feeling at the time that this painting was happening. So let me tell you a little bit about The Scream, because there's a pretty cool story about it. It's based on the experience he had while taking a walk with his two friends at the sunset in Oslo, Norway, which is the capital of Norway. Those are his two friends here. Munch said that he heard a scream that was inside his head, and he thought it was the scream of nature. His friends had no idea what was happening to him, so they just kept walking. So here they are on this bridge. And the reason why I think that he called it the scream of nature is the way he paints the sky. It looks like it's on fire. It's very, very fiery. It's very eerie. It's definitely not a calm sunset. Now, here's the thing. History has said that actually scientists have proven that the sky really did look like it was on fire and was this fiery red when Munch saw it. And the reason why, it was due to a volcanic eruption that happened in Indonesia, which is of course very, very far away from Norway. But even though the volcano was located thousands of miles away, it still produced darkened skies and blood red sunsets in areas all over the world. So, again, looking at his face, did Munch really look like that? No. He's just painting how he's feeling, which I think, obviously in the spirit of Halloween right now, is very appropriate. And this painting is so famous that it was actually stolen twice because it's so popular. When it was stolen for the second time, it was found wrapped in a damp cloth, which caused damage and made some of the paint come off the painting. But they were able to recover it and display it once again at the Munch Museum, which is in Norway. So you could see in Norway not only this painting, but other paintings done by Edvard Munch. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed this presentation on expressive portraits. And for our next art activity, that's what we're going to be doing. All right, talk to you soon.